The first time I saw the child was on a Virginia state road, one morning when the sky seemed darker than normal. I had been driving for hours, the radio off, just me and the sound of the engine in the middle of nowhere. It was in a very closed part of the forest that she appeared. Out of nowhere. A small girl, probably about 6 years old, standing right in the middle of the track. White dress, dark straight hair, lowered face. I braked hard, the tires screamed on the asphalt, I almost flipped the truck. When I managed to stop and got out, there was no one else. I looked with a flashlight, called, but nothing. The bushes on the side didn't even move. I went back to the truck trying to convince myself that it was just tired. A sleep hallucination. But that same night, I received a call later, already standing at a gas station. My sister had been in a car accident. Nothing too serious, but enough to leave me with it on my mind. I didn't connect the dots right away. But 2 weeks later, in Georgia, on a country road, it happened again. Same time. Same deserted road. The same child. Stopping in the middle of the track. And again, when I stopped and got out, she was gone. This time, I stood on the side of the road for a while, trying to understand what was happening. I called home, just to hear a familiar voice. And that's when I knew, my cousin's husband had been found dead on the couch, having suffered a massive heart attack. At the same time, the connection started to form there. As if that child appeared, to warn. Or worse, as if it were a trigger. After that, I started to get paranoid. Every time I took the road alone, I expected to see that white dress appearing in the dark. The third time was the worst. I was already waiting. I was in Missouri, straight stretch, forest on both sides. It was like distorted déjà vu. And then she appeared. Closer this time. The light from the headlight illuminated his face for a second. Pale, with eyes too deep for the size of his face. Almost as if he wasn't a real child. I swerved in reflex, and almost fell into a ditch. When I managed to stop the truck, the engine died. I had to wait for the tow truck. And that same night, my father had a stroke. He survived, but was unable to walk. After that, I started to avoid driving at dawn. I changed routes, took longer breaks, anything to avoid falling into the routine that seemed to invoke that child. But it was no use. She appeared the same way. Always on the road, always forcing me to swerve. And the pattern continued, each apparition was followed by a tragedy. Not with me. With someone close. A friend from work had an accident in his garage. A neighbor was hospitalized with a rare infection. And I started to feel like I was carrying that with me. That kid, or whatever it was using me as a conduit. I even thought about quitting driving. But it's not that simple. Trucking is my livelihood. My life. So I started trying to understand. Writing everything down. Days, times, locations. There was no exact pattern, just one thing that was constant. She always showed up in places where no one could run away and disappear. And she never moved. She never said anything. She just showed up. One time, I tried not to swerve. I sped straight ahead. But the headlights went through her body like smoke. And yet, the next morning, I got the news. My dog, who had been with me for 12 years, had been run over in front of my house. I went after everything I could. I spoke to other truck drivers, looked for reports online, and even joined Reddit forums. I found some similar stories, people who saw children's figures on the road, but none exactly the same. In some cases, people said they stopped and spoke to the child. In others, it was just a figure. But mine was always the same. Clara. Sharp. Too real to be an invention. I thought it was a warning. A kind of omen. But every time she appeared, I couldn't help it. It was as if the body reacted before the head. And there's something I've never told anyone. One of the last times she appeared, I saw her mouth moving. It was fast. A whisper. No sound. But I could read their lips. She said my name. Not boy, not hey, not help. She knew who I was. And that changed everything for me. From then on, I knew it wasn't a random thing. That it was personal. And the next time, it might not be with someone close. It could be me. Since then, I drive as if I'm running away from something that has already caught up with me. Interior light always on, radio loud, hanging on the mirror as if it were an amulet. But nothing stops it. When she wants to appear, she appears. And now, I don't even need to be on the road anymore. I've had visions of her in the bathroom mirror at a gas station, standing behind me, looking. I've heard the sound of light footsteps running along the side of the truck as I tried to sleep. One morning the rear camera activated itself and showed an image of her standing in the dark, right behind the truck. It only disappeared when I turned off the system. The worst thing is that, over time, the warning stopped being about others. I started to feel the consequences within myself. Severe insomnia, headache that doesn't go away, a constant heaviness in the chest. I went to the doctor, had tests. Everything normal. But I know it's not. It's like she's slowly draining something from me. As if each appearance took away a piece. And I never know when the next one will be. I just feel that silence on the road getting thicker. The heavier air. Time seems to stop. And then she appears. There are nights when I stop before the stretch where it usually appears, pull over the truck, close my eyes and pray. Not because I think it will help, but because I don't know what else to do. I've thought about leaving the country, changing my life, disappearing. But the feeling I have is that it is not attached to the road. You're stuck with me. As if I had been chosen to see, to feel, to carry this. I don't know if it's punishment, bad luck, or something else that my mind can't understand. I just know that, since she first appeared, I've never had a smooth trip again. And now I keep asking myself all the time, who will be next? Or, is there still a next one? Because the feeling I have, growing stronger and stronger, is that the next curve is not just another curve. It's the end of the road. And the next time she appears, I may not be able to dodge it. I always followed the same routes, year after year. I know every curve, every detour, every stopping point by heart. But one strange night in West Virginia, something just changed. The GPS went crazy, recalculating without stopping, even with a normal signal. The road was different, narrower, more winding. And that's when I saw the tunnel. I had never been there before, and I looked at the dashboard to see if it was a temporary detour. Nothing. No alerts, no marks on the map. The tunnel was old, made of dark stone, covered in moss. But there were no signs or signage. Just a pitch black inside that seemed thicker than normal. I hesitated, but it was too late to turn the cart around. I entered slowly. The truck's lights barely illuminated the interior. It seemed as if the darkness was sucking the light from the headlights. The tunnel was longer than it looked. The sound of the engine became muffled, as if it had been submerged in water. And then, for a few seconds, everything was silent. Total. Not an engine, not a radio, not even my own heart. Just empty. When I came out the other side, the road looked the same, but there was something strange in the air. As if time out there had a different density. I kept driving, but things started to feel wrong. Old plates, with designs from decades ago. Positions that I swore no longer existed. And the strangest thing, there were no modern cars on the road. Only old models, the kind you only see at collectors' meetings. I stopped at a gas station to try to understand what was happening. The attendant looked at me as if I were from another planet. The fuel pump was manual. And when I asked what day it was, he replied very naturally, May 3, 1987. I felt my legs give out. I thought it was a prank. I looked at my cell phone, no signal, no date. I tried to turn on the radio, but it only played stations with music from the 80s. Nothing digital. Nothing known. I panicked. I left the station, started the truck and drove without stopping. The road seemed to stretch out, as if it would never let me out again. And then I began to understand, that tunnel wasn't just a tunnel. It was a hole. A cut in time. And somehow, I had been pulled into it. I spent hours driving around, trying to find anything that would link me back to the present. But everything around me insisted on maintaining that illusion, or reality, I don't know. Even the truck looked different. The digital dashboard is off, the tracking system is muted. It was as if he too had been pulled along with me. The only thing that worked was the engine. At one point, I saw a sign indicating a city that I knew, or thought I knew. When I entered it, it looked like an old movie set, stores with faded signs, people in clothes from another era, not a cell phone in sight. I stopped at a cafe, and the waitress looked at me strangely. Not because of my face, but because of my clothes, my boots, my digital watch. As if everything about me revealed that I didn't belong there. I tried to act normal, ordered a coffee, and while I was waiting, I heard conversations at the tables next to me. People talking about events that I knew had happened decades ago. As if they were in the now. It was too real to be a dream. When I got back to the truck, I saw a child standing on the sidewalk, watching me. She came close and asked if my truck was the new one with the computer. I just replied that it was old, and left. It was then that an idea came to me. If I went through that tunnel, I might need to go through it again, on the other side, in the opposite direction. But I didn't remember exactly where it was. I walked back down the road as quickly as I could, paying attention to every curve, every detour. The road felt different now, as if it didn't want to let me find the exit. In a patch of denser forest, I saw something on the horizon, the dark outline of the tunnel. But it was narrower, almost like it was closing. Time there seemed denser, slower. The surrounding shadows vibrated, as if they were alive. I went in without thinking twice. The same silence. The same emptiness. But now, the truck began to fail, as if it was being crushed by time itself. I pressed the accelerator, screaming inside, and everything around me began to shake. The lights flickered, the air became heavy, and I felt my body being pulled back. When I finally came out the other side, the world felt right again. Modern license plates, familiar cars, my radio works again. But inside me, something said that I didn't come back alone. And maybe, part of me was left behind. Since that night, my life has never returned to normal. The truck seems to work well, but the panel turns and moves and flashes with the wrong dates, 1987, 1979, once it even appeared in 1954. I've taken it to the workshop 3 times, no one can find the problem. The strangest thing is that sometimes I get interference on the radio. Voices saying things that don't make sense, names I don't recognize, and once I heard someone saying my full name, as if they were calling me back. I've tried to ignore it, but every night trip, I feel like I'm being watched. As if that tunnel had marked my time forever. There was a day, months later, on another route, that I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror of the same road where I entered the tunnel. But it wasn't on the map. It was as if it only appeared to me. I didn't go in. But I stopped the truck and looked for long minutes. I felt that same pressure in the air. That feeling that, if I wanted, I could come back. But back to where? For when? The weather there doesn't follow rules. And I'm afraid I won't be able to get out next time. To become just another one of those that disappear in the middle of the road, without leaving a trace. I started finding similar stories on obscure forums, people who saw roads that no longer existed, who passed through tunnels and stopped in cities that disappeared from the maps. A pattern began to emerge. Everyone was alone, everyone was driving at night, everyone was in moments of distraction or doubt. As if time itself chose these people. I don't know if it's something that the road holds, or if it's something that we carry and only manifests itself there, in the dark. But I know I wasn't the first. And I won't be the last. Today, I avoid roads I don't recognize, even if the GPS says it's the best route. Because there are places where time is not a line. It's a circle. And there are tunnels that aren't passages, they're traps. And if you enter at the wrong time, you may end up discovering that time doesn't want you back. It was almost midnight when I stopped at a small gas station in rural Kansas. I was going to continue traveling until dawn, but I stopped to have a coffee and stretch my legs. When I got back to the truck, there was a man standing nearby, leaning against the back, smoking. He had a very calm demeanor, ordinary clothes, an unshaven beard, and an old cap on his head. He asked me if I could give him a ride to Wichita. He said his car was broken down and he needed to get there urgently. Something about him gave me goosebumps, but he spoke in a calm, polite way. Against my instinct, I let him in. For the first few minutes, he was silent, staring out the window, somewhat absorbed. I started chatting, asking him where he was from, what he did, the usual questions. He answered vaguely, saying he worked in transportation, but didn't go into details. So far, so good. But then he started telling me some strange stories. He asked if I had ever heard of a murder case that happened in a small town in the region in the 90s, a family found dead in their home, with no signs of forced entry. I was surprised because I vaguely remembered the case. He described everything. In too much detail. At first, I thought he was some kind of crime-obsessed person who collects bizarre information. But then he started citing lesser-known cases. A truck driver missing on the Missouri border. A couple who disappeared in 2003. A girl who never came back from her prom in 2007. Cases that I only knew about because I had read about them in obscure forums, the kind that the newspapers forget. But he knew dates, names, even descriptions of the victims' clothes. I started to feel uncomfortable. I asked how he knew all that. He looked ahead, smiled and said, "Let's just say I was nearby." The trip, which should have lasted 2 hours, turned into a torment. Every kilometer, he told another case. Always calmly, as if he had lived it. And it always ended with the same sentence: there are things the police never discover. I had already decided to end the trip early. I was going to stop at the next gas station, pretend to have a mechanical problem, and ask him to get off. But before I did that, he asked to stop at a junction and said he would walk from there. I pulled over, relieved. He got out, and simply disappeared. When I went down to see if he was nearby, there was no one there. No lighthouse, no sound of footsteps. Nothing. Just the quiet night. I went back to the truck trying to understand what had just happened. My heart was still racing, my breathing was short. I sat on the bench and stayed still for a few minutes, staring into space. It was then that I saw something lying on the passenger side floor. A wallet. I picked it up thinking it was his, that I had dropped it. I opened it to see if I could find a document and return it later. But what I found left me completely breathless. The name on the ID was familiar. Very familiar. And then it hit me, it was the name of one of the victims he had mentioned. One of the missing. The prom girl. The photo was of her, but in black and white, faded. The name fit. The date of birth too. But the wallet looked old, as if it had been stored for decades. And the strangest thing, the wallet was dry, clean, as if it had just been manufactured. I stared at that document as if it were going to explode in my hands. My head was spinning. I began to wonder if I had been tricked by a crazy person, or if I had just talked to something that was no longer human. A presence that carried stories that should not be told. In the following days, I tried to locate the victim's family, I looked online, I contacted a forum for the missing. When I described what I had found, a woman responded saying that wallet was missing along with the girl. It was never recovered. It was the same description, the same documents, everything the same. When I told her that someone showed up with her in my truck, she simply left the chat. He never responded again. I tried to leave the wallet with the police, but they said they couldn't accept fines without proof of a connection to a recent crime. Since then, I have carried this wallet hidden in the back of the cabin. As a reminder. As a warning. I've thought about throwing it away, burning it, burying it. But I can't. It feels like it has weight, like it's holding something together. And every time I'm alone, late at night, on some forgotten road, I remember that man's face. From the calm tone of his voice. And the last thing he said before disappearing, some stories don't want to be forgotten. Sometimes when I look in the rearview mirror, I swear I see someone sitting in the back seat, smiling. From then on, things got strange in a way that was difficult to explain. The truck's radio started to fail in certain sections, but only at night. Sometimes it turns on by itself and, instead of music or news, it just transmits hissing, or whispered voices, as if they are saying something. I've tried recording, but it never captures anything. There was one morning when I woke up with the cabin light on, and my wallet was on my lap. I clearly remember leaving it locked at the bottom of the tool compartment. Since then, I've been turning the key to that locker every night. Even so, sometimes it appears out of place. I started having strange dreams. Nights when I'm driving with the man sitting next to me, telling me new stories. Names I've never heard. When I wake up, I search, and they exist. Missing people, cold cases, all real. As if he were handing me a list, a grim inventory of people the world has forgotten. And the worst part, the feeling I have is that he didn't disappear, he just chose me. As if now it was my turn to carry these stories, to listen, to remember. As if he had left me something more than his wallet. I've already thought about leaving the road. Sell the truck, disappear, try a different life. But I can't. Something keeps me here. Something stronger than reason. As if I were part of it now, as if every trip was a chance for him to come back. I've seen similar people in posts, silent men with that same look. I've heard truck drivers tell similar stories. But no one talks for long. It's as if talking too much about him is the invitation he needs to appear again. So I follow. Always at night, always silent. And when someone asks me for a ride, I think twice. Because now I know that not everyone who gets in your truck is going somewhere. Sometimes they just come back. And sometimes, they just want to be remembered. I've carried everything in this life. Live animals, dismantled machines, crates of drinks, even airplane parts. But nothing compares to the load I carried on a rainy night leaving Ohio. It was a private delivery. I picked it up directly from the contractor, who seemed to be in a hurry. He said it was museum material, and that he couldn't open the compartment for anything, signed documentation, payment in advance. The truck was sealed in front of me, and as the money was good and the journey was short, I accepted without asking questions. However, in the first hour of the trip, things started to go out of order. On the deserted road, with the rain pounding on the windshield and the sound of the wiper beating the rhythm, I started to hear dull thuds coming from behind. At first I thought it was the load swinging. But the sound wasn't that of a loose object, it was rhythmic. As if someone was rapping their knuckles against the inside wall of the body. I slowed down, looked in the mirrors, but everything was dark. Nothing out of place. I continued. But then came the whispers. Low, almost imperceptible, but you could feel that they weren't from the radio, nor from the wind. It was as if something was moving in there. The definitive stop came when I passed a section with no signal, and the truck's dashboard went out for a second. The cabin lights flickered, and I smelled a strong smell of burning flesh. I stopped on the side of the road, got out with the flashlight and went to the back. The seal was still intact, but there was something running through the bottom crack. A thick, dark, somewhat viscous liquid. I pulled over and the smell got worse. I decided to break the seal, something I never do, and open it to see what was happening. When the door opened, I almost vomited immediately. The interior of the truck was full of symbols drawn in charcoal on the walls, remains of melted candles, straw dolls hanging upside down. And in the center, wrapped in a grimy cloth, was what appeared to be a makeshift altar. He had bowls of small bones, fingers, perhaps, and some objects that looked like old, rusty tools covered in dried blood. And the most frightening thing, a mask carved from wood, with distorted features, was positioned as if it was looking at whoever opened the door. I was paralyzed. My body froze, as if something inside me knew I shouldn't be there. But I had already opened it. I had already seen it. And that seemed to have been made to be carried by someone who had no idea what they were carrying. I closed the door tightly, sealed it again with some improvised tape I had in the toolbox, and returned to the cabin. I was shaking, sweating cold, with the smell still clinging to my clothes. I started the engine and just wanted to get out of there. The rain was getting worse, and every minute inside that truck seemed to last an eternity. But then the noises started again. This time, louder. Dry, rapid beats, as if something was moving inside the load. As if he knew I had seen it. I turned on the radio to try to distract my mind, but all I heard was static. I tried praying, something I hadn't done in years. After a few kilometers, I felt the cabin getting colder. A cold that didn't come from the air conditioning. It was a damp cold, like a cellar, like something buried. And along with it, a heavy feeling, as if there was someone sitting behind me. I looked in the rearview mirror every few minutes, hoping to see something on the seat. I didn't see anything. But the wait continued. I went straight through 2 gas stations, even with the tank in reserve. I couldn't stop. I felt like if I stopped, I wouldn't go out again. As if something had activated since the moment I opened that door. Finally I arrived at the delivery point. A warehouse at the end of a rural road, without signs, surrounded by tall grass. As soon as I stopped, 2 men appeared from the dark, without saying a word. They had powerful flashlights and wore gloves. They just asked to confirm the load number and opened the back as if they knew exactly what they were doing. One of them looked at me and asked, without emotion, "Did you open it?" I immediately denied it, shaking my head. He stared for a few seconds, then nodded and began unloading. They sent me away without signing a receipt, without final payment, without even a thank you. I drove non-stop to the nearest town and went straight to a car wash, as if I could wash it off with soap and water. But the smell. I still smell it sometimes. Months later, I found an article online. An investigation into disappearances linked to occult cults in rural areas. The photo showed symbols similar to those I saw on the bodywork. I sent an anonymous email telling me what I experienced. I never got a response. But every now and then, I receive empty emails with just a symbol as the title. The same symbol drawn inside the load. Since then, I have refused any delivery that did not have a clear note, known customer, open and visible cargo. But even with these precautions, the feeling did not go away. Sometimes, when I'm on the road alone in the early hours of the morning, I still hear the same sounds, dull thumping, as if coming from inside the cargo, even when it's empty. There was one time I stopped the truck to check, and the interior was clean. But in the left corner of the wall, there was a discrete charcoal line, as if someone had started to remake one of the symbols. That froze me. I took a photo, but when I went to show it to someone, it was gone from the gallery. I started having nightmares. Always the same. I'm driving and, in the mirror, I see the wooden mask, now in the back seat, staring into the rearview mirror. In every dream, the mask approaches, but I wake up before I see the face beneath. I've already tried to throw away everything I had from that night, receipts, notes, even the cabin carpet. It's no use. The energy was permeated. As if, by opening that door, I had been part of something bigger, ancient, and deeply wrong. Something that didn't end when I delivered the cargo. Something that is still being carried out. One time, I received an envelope at my address, with no return address. Inside, a single sheet with a map and a circle marked in red, in a region I've never heard of. No caption, no explanation. On the back, just one sentence, "You know the way." It burned my hands just holding it. I threw it in the trash and never saw it again. But that phrase kept ringing in my head. Am I marked? Wasn't that journey just a delivery? Could it be that, without realizing it, I transported something that wasn't just physical? Today, I don't go near Ohio. Never again. I don't accept private cargo. I don't talk to anyone without documentation. And still, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking I'm on that road again, with that thing crashing behind me. And, no matter how much I have delivered, I feel that the burden is still with me. As if now, I was the recipient. It was supposed to be a simple delivery, leaving Kentucky for North Carolina, nothing out of the ordinary. I hit the road at dusk, wanting to arrive before dawn. But the fog began to descend earlier than expected. First, it was just a thin veil, typical of the mountainous region. Then it became a thick curtain that swallowed everything in front of it. I turned on the dipped headlights, reduced speed and drove steadily, but soon I lost cell phone signal and the GPS locked up. The road became too silent, as if the sound had been sucked away by the fog. I couldn't see anything more than 3 meters in front of the truck. I continued driving slowly, paying attention, until I saw a sign indicating a diner called Maggie's Diner. It looked like something from another time, faint neon sign, old building. I walked past her without stopping, I only registered the name by reflex. 20 minutes later, the strange thing happened. I saw the same sign again. The same sign, the same building, everything identical. I thought it might be a franchise, some coincidence. But then, I also saw the same fallen tree, the same hole in the asphalt, the same crow perched on the same branch. It was running in circles. The road made me return to the same point, without me realizing it. I tried to turn around, change lanes, drive in the opposite direction. But it was no use. No matter what I did, I always ended up walking past that damn restaurant again. The mist seemed thicker with each turn, almost solid, as if it had weight. I turned on the radio to see if I could find any local frequencies, but it was just static. I tried to count the time. Each lap seemed to last exactly 17 minutes. I started marking it on paper, just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. And it wasn't. Something there really grabbed me. On the fourth lap, I decided to stop. I parked in front of the restaurant and went inside. The place was empty, except for a woman behind the counter. He seemed unsurprised by my presence. When I asked where I was, she just replied, "In the part where no one goes back." I ordered a coffee, trying to hide my fear, and asked how to get out of there. She looked at me for a few seconds, smiled pitifully and said, "You don't understand, you're not driving anymore. You're being driven." That stopped me. I left immediately, heart racing, and returned to the truck. But when I started the engine, the digital clock showed the same time as when I entered the restaurant. Time had also stopped. I tried to remain calm and drove again, now with a mixture of anger and despair. Every curve, every shadow, everything looked the same. And, indeed, it was. The same endless road, the same repeated section, the same crow in the tree. I started screaming inside the cabin, hitting the steering wheel, begging for it to stop. But the fog only grew thicker. The air began to feel stuffy, heavy, as if the road itself was squeezing me. At some point I tried to get out of the truck and walk. I took 30 steps into the woods next door, and came out again on the other side, as if I had crossed an invisible circle. That's when I realized the worst: there was no smell. Nothing. Not diesel, not rubber, not the forest. It was as if the world there was a poorly made copy of reality. A recycled scenario, set up to deceive me. I tried to sleep, hoping that when I woke up everything would go back to normal. But I couldn't. Time didn't pass. The clock still showed 10:47 p.m., always. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I swear I saw my own reflection, smiling. But I wasn't smiling. That broke me apart inside. Something was watching me. Something that imitated everything, including me. I started thinking about absurd things. At what point had I died and just didn't know it? Whether this was some kind of purgatory, a time trap, or a glitch in space. With each new turn, the world seemed more distorted. The diner sign started flashing in patterns that I was sure hadn't been there before. The woman in the restaurant no longer looked human. Her face changed with each turn, as if it were slowly melting. I stopped going in, but she still appeared inside, through the window, always looking at me as if she knew I had no way out. On the 10th lap, I left the truck on the shoulder and ran. I ran along the road, aimlessly, hoping to break the cycle. When I stopped, out of breath, the fog cleared a little, and I was standing in front of my truck. Exactly where I started. I didn't run in a straight line. I was spinning on myself. The road was not a road. It was a loop. And now I knew that the more I tried to escape, the more trapped I would become. And deep down, something in that fog seemed to feed on it. It was then that I stopped resisting. I stood in the driver's seat, with the engine off, the key out of the ignition. I waited. I just waited. The mist remained around, motionless. The snack bar sign was still blinking, but now in a slower sequence. And then I noticed something I had never done before. I looked at the passenger seat. There was a closed, brown envelope. I didn't remember putting anything there. I took it, opened it with my hands shaking, and inside there was just a sheet with 4 words written by hand, in crooked letters, "Come back through the right thought." I spent days trying to understand what that meant. Going back with the right thought? Going back to where? Which thought? I began to remember the original route, the road before the fog tunnel, the sky before the darkness. I focused everything I had on mentally reliving the path, the simple details that led me there, the sound of the radio, the taste of the coffee, the name of my daughter who called me before leaving. I clung to the real memory, as if it were a rope. I closed my eyes in the middle of that motionless road and thought, I exist outside of this. When I opened my eyes again, the fog was gone. The road was clear, the sun rising over the horizon. The clock read 6:12. The GPS worked again. The radio played ordinary music. And for a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. But when I looked in the passenger seat, the envelope was still there. The same lyrics, the same words. And now, even out of the fog, something in me has never been the same. Because I understood that the road is not just asphalt and destination. Sometimes it doubles. And when it doubles, you can't always go back. To this day, I avoid driving in fog. I change the route, stop if necessary, wait to pass. But every time I see the fog start to descend, I feel my heart speed up. Because I know that, somewhere in the country, that road is still there. Waiting for me. And that if I get into it again, maybe I won't be able to think the right way anymore. And this time, maybe I won't come back.